the next session is with Cherihan on design and research branding strategy. She is an international ops and communication holder at Dark Matter Labs, an award-winning strategist and public speaker with years of experience in distilling key insights from chaos and crafting impactful brands and design solutions for SPOs. Welcome, Cherihan.
Let's get into it without any further ado. So my name is Cherihan. My background is in business, focusing on social impact and experiential design. My last job was at Dossier Creative, where I worked as a brand and business strategist for Untitled Lab as well, mostly focusing around branding social purpose organizations. I'm also a part-time travel photographer when I get the opportunity, especially when borders open up again. Looking forward to that. And I currently work at Dark Matter Labs in their operations and communication teams. Dark Matter focuses on climate resiliency and technological uptake on systems thinking. So that's been really exciting. And if you've ever got any questions, please feel free to reach out or ask more about it. So what are we going to be talking about today? I'm going to be focusing in on the collaborative efforts of design thinking and branding strategy and how that builds a really effective foundation for the design and visual language of a lot of organizations out there. So we're going to start off with design thinking, going into discovery and research sections, how to pull all of that together into synthesizing effective insights and building a brand strategy from that. And then from there, visualizing that brand strategy and turning that into beautiful designs. So, design thinking. Definitely a process for creative problem solving. It is absolutely and never will be linear, very iterative. You really have to trust the process and trust yourself through the frustration as it goes. But it really is used to deploy to understand users, challenge your assumptions that you're arriving with, redefine problems, and create effective solutions that you can prototype and then test and iterate on. It is very much a tool to navigate that messy, confusing, and unknown part of projects. A lot of you will be familiar with this divergent converging process. I personally love having a clearish way, that allows me to see how I can expand on my learnings and then bring it back. It allows me to explore a lot of topics while still keeping that motion going and allowing to move to the next phase. The one I'll be focusing on today is the one that I tend to use mostly for branding projects. So we start off with research, we explore all of that, landscape mapping and so forth. We then synthesize that into effective insights, build a strategy from that, and then go back out, ideate different visual languages, evaluate that, making sure we're designing for feedback, and then creating actual designs above and beyond the mood boards, and then evaluating that and moving that into production. When I'm designing and how I focus my design thinking is always putting humans at the center as well as planet. So making sure that when we're designing a brand for an organization that is focused around people, especially in my sphere where I tend to do this for social purpose organizations, making sure that we're understanding the essence of the language that we're using. Language can be a very simple tool, but it manifests a lot of the reality that we're facing with. It's how we use it as lenses to the world that we're engaging with. So being careful to making sure that you're doing justice to everyone and that you're representing in your brand, but also who you're communicating to. Planet-centered design is making sure that if you're able to communicate and engage in ways that is more sustainable, that provides and promotes this healthier relationship with our earth, to always put that at the forefront, put that at the center, no matter what it is that you're designing, the project, the brand, the product itself. It's important to keep in mind how essential it is, that relationship, and to keep it healthy. So let's dive into the discovery and exploration phase, the first divergent part of our process. This phase can be super exciting at first and then a bit overwhelming as we move forward, so keep that in mind that it's not just you. Using immersive empathy is a great place to start. Take a day in the life of the customer that you're trying to solve a problem for or that you're designing for, and just understand from where they're coming from. This in general is just always a great tool for using it with your coworkers or your friends or whatnot, but just really take the walking in their shoes for a day really to heart and find all the findings as you can from it. You have the privilege of having fresh eyes in a new situation for yourself, so you'll notice things that someone who might have been in this phase or in this process over and over again might not notice. Using your observation skill sets and knowing when observations are different from facts. A fact would be, there's 5 people in the room. An observation is that 3 of those 5 people were very anxious or nervous or very elated, but being mindful of what is going on in reading a place. Interviewing is always a phenomenal process to gather as much insight. Interviewing the clients that you're branding for as well as their users. And in this section, I love thinking about extreme users. So extreme users are people who really, really use your product and are your biggest promoters. These people will give you so much more insights about your product and how to design for it because they have strongly formulated opinions. They will not be the majority of the consumers that will be taking in your designs or your product, but they'll have the most to say about it. I also love to use extreme non-users. This allows you to understand why somebody's avoiding the product itself and how you can make sure that you're tackling that in the best way possible. Another step after that in the discovery and findings section is making sure that you're mapping out the landscape that it finds itself in. No idea, no structure lives in a silo. We all live in an ecosystem. So engage with that. What happens before a product is used? What is engaging after it? Thinking about it as a systems and creating shortcuts instead of detours will facilitate your design and making it more accessible for people who are obviously time hungry. So making sure that you understand also your competitors and your collaborators. It's not always a competitive landscape. So making sure that you map that out and get inspired by them and build on top of that. One of my favorite elements is also following tension. And I will bring this up a lot in this presentation, and I pre-apologize for that, but it is so important to navigate tension points with a lot of bravery and courage. Tensions is easily something to avoid, but it often sits between a border of 2 things, and it will demonstrate a nuance that's quite crucial to follow through. While you're in this section, I want you to be very careful about biases, the ones that your clients brings, the one that the users brings, and the one that you bring as well. Just admit it, as much as work that we try to do, we bring biases. It's how our brain works to try to make a world a much simpler place for us to quickly understand. So face it and be aware of it and make sure that it's not affecting your research. Allow, for a diverse team to come together so that you can challenge each other's biases. Another quick point to that one is obviously assumptions. When we start a project, we already build assumptions on how products will be used, and it's easy to, hold that very close to heart. Let go of that. You never know what your users are really using your product for. Allow yourself for surprise and really embrace that curiosity and suspend any assumption that you have to allow people to show you a different perspective. Observer effect is also something that's very crucial to be mindful of. This is constantly a problem in anthropology. As much as we'd like to be harmless flies on the walls, the moment you're in the room observing someone doing something, the behavior changes. Even if you're not in the room, but you're watching a video of them doing it, and they're aware of that, they're being more conscious of it. There's second layers to it. So just be aware that that will change the behavior and try to account for it. When you're interviewing people, also leading questions are a very dangerous trap. We all have this idea of how the question will be answered, and we can embed that subtly sometimes in our questions. Ask open-ended questions. And even though you have a list of questions prepared for an interview, don't stick to it too strongly. Ask the ones that are absolutely essential at the beginning, but then allow the people that you're interviewing to take you on a different journey and see where that goes. And probe within their statements. Ask why and continue following that. Be also very aware of your confirmation bias. We all have this theory of why a thing is a certain way or products should be represented and how it's being used. But it's a very dangerous thing to hold because you will only look at the things that confirm what you actually already believe. Try flipping that in your head. Try to get constantly disproven and see that if you're aiming to be wrong, you'll actually get a lot more insight because you're making more room for the unknown. In this section, we often get into values of insights space. This is absolutely normal. It can be very frustrating, and no matter how many times you go through it, it's always a bit of a dip. So basically the value of insights is this idea that as you start off, you feel really excited, you're very hopeful, and then the more as you go through it, the more information you get, you feel, like you dip because you're feeling lost, there's so much to keep in mind, everything seems to be wrong, and, it doesn't seem like it's going to work out anymore. Very normal. As you keep going, you eventually start seeing patterns and themes, and you build back up on the positivity, but with more confidence instead of hope this time. So, if you ever feel like this, know you're not alone, and it's very normal within the design thinking world. So, how do you get all of that information, all that exploration, synthesize it into an effective strategy? One of the processes that I love using is sifting, sorting, and ranking all the information I get. Sift through all of them, see what's actually useful, what was valid, and keep those around. Sort them, organize them into themes, into different correlation systems, and see what actually is a causation correlation, and find patterns out of that. Out of these, and you rank them in importance and validity of the questions you're actually trying to solve. Finding themes across the board is really crucial, both for the visual language, the verbal identity you'll be designing, but anything for the product design, especially when you're doing experiential design. Feel comfortable in swimming in the nuances. Life is all about the subtleties, and those subtleties at the beginning will create a massive impact later on. So allow yourself to swim in that, and don't shy away from it. Don't lump things together just because you think they're the same or similar enough. Divide that. Split the difference there. Developing how might we's is a perfect tool from design thinking. I love using this. Doing how might we statements allows to have the room get invited into thinking and collaborating and brainstorming about the problem in front of you. So, how might we design this product to be much more accessible? How might we design this product to be more sustainable? It just begs the question to have people come in and discuss it further. It's all it is really a framing question. And then developing a brand strategy from this. So I'll go into each of these a bit more, but developing the why, how, what, the values, making sure that is, very much in the foundation to help make decisions. How does a brand show up in their characters and voice and how it sounds? And who are you speaking to? So starting off with the why, how, what. I'm sure that a lot of you are familiar with this. This is Simon Sinek's Golden Circle. So at the center, you've got the why, the rallying cry for why your organization exists. The second circle is the how. The how are ways the why gets accomplished. And eventually the what, the actual product that is being exchanged. So a really great example of this is Apple. And their why is to, change the status quo. How they do this is by developing a very user-friendly interface that is accessible by most. And their what is a computer, it's a hardware. What Simon Sinek really believes is that people buy products and believe in a message for the why, even though they're purchasing the what. So making sure that is very strong will not only help you design a more effective brand that communicates to people's hearts, but it will also help the company itself drive forward their vision and their mission. Values, characters, and voice. So this is constantly across the board exercises that you really do need to do to develop a brand. A brand at the end of the day is a personification and the beautifying of an organization. It is really the ability to give it a voice and breathe it into life. The values, I usually like to pick 5 with a center one. What I do with clients is I'll actually send them a document with a bit of homework, and I'll send them a list of values to have there. Obviously, they're more than welcome to bring their own words and values and principles, but making sure that they have somewhere to start. Characters that they have, like someone is very authentic, or they're very bold as an organization, and how that will translate into their voice. How do they speak? If they're authentic, they're obviously going to be a bit more accessible in their language. Here again to note, I love pursuing the tension points. So how I often go about this is I send over the homework package. I get people to fill out these questionnaires about their values, their characters, and how they visualize that, what their why, how, what is. And then I'll bring everybody together in the same room, either digitally or physical, and have them walk through what they've responded in that questionnaire. And in this phase, you'll hear people debate and discuss between them, which is great. Allow them to do that, absorb that. And then when there is a bit of a disagreement or a tension, or it's this, but it's not just that, pursue that. Again, it falls on the border of two things, and those nuances are just what you need to really get it. Really having people think about these before you meet up with them for a big workshop is really important. It allows people to sit with it, to sleep on it for a while, and it always turns out better results. So once you've got all this nailed down, you're starting to really create a great and effective foundation for the brand. Understanding your audience will always be crucial, not only in their needs, but also how to understand communicating to them. That's a perfect product for somebody, but unless you are able to talk to them and explain that, it will be useless. Now, there is a ton of exercises out there to design for personas. I have a love-hate relationship with designing for personas because I often find that it will tag along or build on top of stereotypes. So I like to avoid this idea of really fleshing out a demographic. Just because I'm a woman in my mid to late 20s, it doesn't mean that I will necessarily like certain things that research shows that I will. Those are often correlations or guided by certain things, and I find that it can actually box me in a place. So I don't want to be part of that system. But something that is very crucial to understand with your audience is their motivation and expectation. It is their relation with the product that you are providing them, the service you're providing them. So understand what motivates them to approach, the need for a product, and then understand what their expectations of your product is so that you can make sure to knock that out of the park. It helps you understand what entices them and how they engage, and then we'll extend that experience. This is just a quick example of a student. So this project was about a field trip. So we had a very particular group of students to do this, but we were really honest about it. This is a field trip that we're designing. The expectation is to provide the information to complete her homework, to interact with people and space. Motivation, get out of school, to update her social media feed, to hang out with her friends. You also have to be really honest about these if you want to make your communication really effective. Right, so at this point, you've got your why, how, what, you've got your values, your character, your voice, you know who you're speaking to, you know who you are, you've decided this, you get to move forward in divergent process again, and you're exploring your visual brand strategy. This is when you get to decide, what is the mood board, what is the thoughts that we're going to go towards, what are the colors and what emotions we really want to entice, what values we want to really bring forward. Now, knowledge can be brought forward in many different ways as an example. It can be through humor and wit, but it can also be through a serious tone, an academic sense. So what is a combination of values that make you unique? Here, what you really want to do, I like to design 3 different mood boards at least, minimum. Too many will be overwhelming to your clients and will often bring out analysis paralysis. But at least having 3 divergent space to go. And to design it for feedback. You want to make them very different from one another. You want to make one maybe more serious, or one much closer to what their existing brand looks like, and one really far out and very different than they've ever imagined. The idea here is to push them to think about how their values can be visualized very differently. So make sure to embed that in the process. It's not just 3 different similar versions, you really got to push them to think differently. It's important here to be committed to the work and not attached to the idea. It's easy as designers. We've all done it. I do it all the time. You love a certain board, you get attached to the idea and the solution, but you sometimes aren't committed to the work anymore because you've gotten too attached. So be committed to improving it besides the one that you've fallen in love with. So this is an example of 3 different mood boards that I've done for a digital bank company that had a planet-centered focus for their product. So they had carbon offsetting as one of their essential services, and they would only invest in sustainable initiatives. So a lot of their values was, authenticity, community, and trust. And how that visualized could be very differently. So I pushed them to think about it, on a more serious tone at the bottom, and what is on my left, a much newer, edgier look for a younger generation, or on the other top one, on my top right, to have a more community, lifestyle-based one, and having it much more inspired with graphics from nature. So you could take the same idea and the same value system, but materialize it in very different ways. Once you've received feedback, you evaluate, and often it is a combination of all 3. You've pushed them to think about this. You then get to start creating the design aspect. So this is more of how the brand, will actually look like on a logo, on the graphics, on the photography, and the fonts. You really are starting to, get closer and closer to the final brand. So there's often elements here that I like to use of how to get from insights to ideas. So I start off always by getting inspired by constraints. What are the things that are non-negotiable? Maybe the major competitor uses bright orange as their main color. So you want to make sure to avoid that at all costs. Don't even bother trying to start designing with that. Or, for example, if I was designing for a competitor FedEx, I would have to be sure that I can't design for arrows. I think constraints are a massive creativity launchpad. You can't really draw outside the box unless you have a box to draw outside of. I think most of us have experienced looking at an empty canvas and feeling more paralysis than inspired. So, start with the constraints. Do design warm-ups. Get your brain a different mindset for doing this. Whether that's moving a room or getting inspired with a walk or lying down and staring at the ceiling. One of my favorite design warm-ups is printing out, 30 circles, and within 3 minutes I have to draw something in every circle. It doesn't have to be good, it doesn't have to be great, but I have to finish it. It just gets the brain going and unafraid of messing up. Have brainstorm sessions. Walk around, work with people, have soundboards. I know it's difficult to do that in person nowadays, but there's multiple ways of being engaging across digital platforms, and also just using the people around you. My friends often inspire a different way of looking at things for my work. And voting also based on ideas. I like to have a voting system of the most innovative, most out there, but also the most likely to succeed. Why I separate those 2 is because often the most likely to succeed is not the most innovative one. But you don't want to miss out on that. Maybe it can't be done today, but it doesn't mean that it's a bad idea and it can't be done tomorrow. So allow for both of those to rise to the top. Again, I'm going to say this one more time. Constraints are creativity launchpads. I think this one is really important to hold dear because it is so easy to get stifled in creativity when everything is your option. If ever you're lost, look at the walls that you're working within so that you can break them down and work above them or beyond them, but start with them. So, after you've done that, you're getting your ideas, think about how your design behaves. How does it look like, just on a website. It's different, same voice, different tones, right? So making sure that you understand how it evolves and how it acts amongst the different platforms, how it engages with its clients, and really is voicing what the brand strategy. Always go back to that foundation that you've developed at the beginning, because those foundation was designed on insights and reality, and it really will ground you over and over again. It's easy to get stuck. So these are some of my favorite tips about getting unstuck. One of them is going the opposite way. What are some awful ideas? What if we did this and you just did a horrible job of describing what it is that we wanted to describe? Pursuing this does a wonderful job of, again, describing what it isn't, why it wouldn't be effective. And in that pursuit of understanding that, you often get really great insight. Get inspired from other industries. I was in a project for experiential design for Aspen and their rental skis experience, and I got so wildly inspired by Disney World. It's, the same, but also absolutely different. Different industry, but the same experience. It's the same excitement. Revisit the problem. Go over and over and over again back to the problem. You'll find your constraints there. You'll find inspiration there. And it'll be much more intuitive because it's grounded on the actual question you're trying to solve. None of that works? Go take a walk. Go outside. Change your environment. Change the people around you. And allow yourself to just take a break from the project you're working on. But really, I think at the end of the day, solutions really start revealing themselves within the problem. So it's a great and phenomenal place to be also to revisit. Don't be afraid to have a prototype V0.crap is what I call it. Go for pen and paper. Develop criteria to make sure that it's being, valid in the question you're trying to answer. I'd usually go about the criterion making sure it's emotional, it's engaging, it's educating, it's extending somebody's experience, and it's inclusive for everyone. That's my 5 E's. Make sure that prototyping is a tool to learn, not to succeed. And iterate quickly. Don't be afraid to just go back to the drawing board and start again. So that's the summary of my divergent conversion process and how it engages with the brand strategy. So you start with research, explore, and you synthesize into a strategy. You ideate a visual language, and you evaluate that, create an effective design, and once that design is evaluated, then you go into production. In practice, it's never linear, or circular for that matter. There's a rule book, so don't worry about it. A lot of us is making it up as we go, and it can be incredibly frustrating. But again, know that you're not alone, and to trust the process, and to know that you will get through it, and it'll make sense. Eventually. It's not clear. The journey is absolutely not clear. It's lived forward and understood backwards, but that's just part of the game. And at least trust yourself and your guidance within, the problems sphere that you're doing the research in. And befriend the undefined. Make friends with the nuances and the messy and the confusing. You'll find a lot of beauty in it once you kind of surrender yourself to it. I think at the end, that pretty much summarizes it. I unfortunately don't have too much time to dive into an example of it. But you can reach out to me at this email, cherihan@gmail.com. See some more of my work at cherihan.com. Or reach out to me in any other way. But I'd look forward to being part of the Q&A section, and I hope that this helps you feel comfortable in the messy and undefined space that is designing brands. Thank you.
Great, that summarizes Sharon's call. And now we have one question. Peggy, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah. So we do have one question, and the question is, can you elaborate on designing with extreme users? How do we define that, and would that not lead to thinking with biases?
That's an awesome question, and I love that we're thinking for biases in this regard very quickly. So let me start with the first part. Can I elaborate with the designing with extreme users? So extreme users are pretty much people again who are kind of evangelist of the work that you're doing. You know, if let's say you're designing for a car, it'd be great to interview, you know, a taxi driver or an Uber driver, somebody who's very much on the road most of the day. So that's an extreme user. It's rare that somebody drives as much as them. And in that sense, you know, you're really tapping into somebody who has very formulated opinions and experiences in that regard. And then an extreme non-user would be somebody who doesn't have a driver's license and only takes transit. So it kind of forces you to see the contrast between the two. And while you're doing this, you're also aware that you're interviewing an extreme user. You might not be aware when you start a survey or an interview session, but I think it's very often clear that that you're facing somebody who's very committed to the product or very non-committed to it in a lot of ways. And how to allow that not lead with biases. So biases, when I refer to them in design thinking, it's more about your assumptions, your perspective, your predetermined perspective on something. So if you allow yourself to just show up with open-ended questions and not lead them anywhere, you know, you will get an extreme opinion, but you won't show up with your own bias. And you'll understand to take what they say from an extreme user's perspective. So, you know, biases will never be 100% out of your research project or any design thinking, but to acknowledge it and be aware of it is sometimes the best that you can do. But yeah, understanding that relationship between the two, great question. And I think a lot of it is just being aware of it and knowing, you know, how much of an outlier the person that you're interviewing is for what it is that you're designing. I hope that answers it.